"Your contract is terminated," the regional head said, not looking up. I calmly handed my federal clearance papers to the military liaison beside him. He glanced down, then froze. His eyes shot to the head. "Sir, the funding, secure the site immediately. Now." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as the color drained from Robert Hutchinson's face. The man who just fired me now looked like he'd seen his entire career flash before his eyes. The military liaison, Colonel James Wright, had gone completely still, his fingers gripping my clearance documentation like it might explode. Stories like these happen more often than most people realize. This is what happens when corporate arrogance meets federal accountability. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where workplace justice isn't just a dream, it's documented reality. If stories of accountability resonate with you, consider subscribing. The support helps bring more of these stories forward, and together, we're building a community working toward that 7,000 subscriber milestone. Every subscription matters. My name is Sophia Hartwell, and at the time this happened, I held the position of Senior Systems Integration Specialist with TS/SCI clearance. I came from a background that taught me to value every person's contribution, regardless of their title. My parents ran a community center in Ohio, and they showed me early on that empathy isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That foundation shaped everything about how I approached my work and the people around me. The contract termination happened on a Wednesday morning in March. I'd been working at TechCore Defense Solutions for 18 months, embedded in their classified systems division. The facility sat in a nondescript office park outside Arlington, Virginia. The kind of place that looked like any other tech company from the outside, but required 3 separate security checkpoints to actually enter. Robert Hutchinson had been promoted to Regional Operations Director about 6 weeks prior. He came from the commercial side of the business, someone who'd spent his career optimizing profit margins and cutting what he considered redundant expenses. He had that particular brand of confidence that comes from success in one arena, making someone believe they understand all arenas. His first company-wide email had been about streamlining operations and maximizing resource efficiency. Translation: he planned to cut positions and renegotiate contracts. Those of us working on the classified side exchanged concerned glances, but figured our federal oversight provided some protection. We were wrong. Or rather, I was wrong about how far someone would go without understanding what they were actually cutting. The meeting had been scheduled with just 12 hours' notice. Contract review session, the calendar invite read. No agenda, no preparation materials, just a time and a conference room number. I'd arrived at 8:30 a.m. sharp. The conference room was one of the smaller ones, beige walls, a table that seated 8, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. Robert sat at the head of the table, laptop open, barely acknowledging my entrance. Colonel Wright sat to his right, in uniform, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Miss Hartwell," Robert began, still focused on his screen. "Thank you for coming. This will be brief." I set my bag down and remained standing. Something in his tone told me sitting would be a mistake. "After reviewing our contracted personnel costs, I've determined that your position represents an inefficient allocation of resources. Your skill set, while specialized, can be covered by redistributing responsibilities among existing staff." He finally looked up, his expression practiced and neutral. "Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. HR will process your final payment and handle the exit procedures." The words hung in the air for a moment. Colonel Wright shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. "I see," I said calmly. "And the classified systems integration for Project Sentinel, that's being reassigned." Robert waved a hand dismissively. "The team will absorb those duties. Mitchell has a background in systems work, and Claudia has her security clearance. Between the two of them, continuity will be maintained." Mitchell was a project manager whose background in systems work consisted of a 2-week coding boot camp 3 years ago. Claudia's clearance was secret level, 2 full tiers below what Project Sentinel required. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I'd started carrying to every meeting once Robert took over. Inside were my federal clearance papers, my project authorization documents, and my direct appointment letter from the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. Before we finalize anything, I said, keeping my voice level, I think Colonel Wright should review these. I handed the folder across the table. The colonel opened it, and I watched his eyes move across the first page, then the second. His posture changed entirely, shoulders back, expression hardening into something between alarm and anger. Robert noticed. What is it? Colonel Wright didn't answer him. Instead, he looked at me. Miss Hartwell, is this documentation current as of this week? Yes, sir, updated Monday. He flipped to the third page, and I saw his throat work as he swallowed. When he spoke, his voice had dropped into a tone I recognized from my military family members, the voice used when something has gone catastrophically wrong. Sir, he said, finally addressing Robert. Sir, the funding, secure the site immediately. Now. Robert blinked, confused. What are you talking about? I just need to process a contract termination. Colonel Wright stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. Mr. Hutchinson, do you know what TS/SCI clearance means? Top secret something, Robert said, irritation creeping into his voice. I know she has clearance, so do others on the team. Top secret/sensitive compartmented information, the colonel said. It's not just a clearance level. It's access to specific programs. Miss Hartwell isn't just a contractor. According to this documentation, she holds the only active clearance for 3 separate compartmented programs this facility is running. Not 1, 3. He placed the folder down and pointed at specific sections. She's the primary systems integrator for Project Sentinel, the secondary fail-safe administrator for Operation Watchtower, and the sole certified technician for the Aegis protocol implementation at this site. Robert's confidence flickered. Then we'll get her clearances transferred. It's just paperwork. It's not just paperwork, Colonel Wright said, and now there was an edge to his voice. These clearances take between 18 months and 3 years to obtain, require presidential-level approval for the compartmented access, and demand continuous presence on the programs. You can't just transfer them, you can't reassign them, and you absolutely cannot have a gap in coverage. He tapped another section of the documentation. Do you see this notation? Critical infrastructure designation. Do you know what that means? Robert said nothing. It means that if this facility loses its certified operator for these systems, federal funding is suspended pending security review. Not paused, suspended. Every contract associated with these programs enters immediate review status. Given that Project Sentinel alone represents $42 million in annual funding, and this facility's other classified work totals another $68 million, you're looking at a complete operational shutdown. The room had gone very quiet. I could hear the ventilation system, the distant sound of someone's phone ringing in another office. Robert's face had progressed from pale to ashen. That can't be right. Why wouldn't I have been briefed on this? You were, I said quietly. Both men looked at me. I sent you a memorandum 3 weeks ago outlining the federal requirements for my position and the consequences of contract disruption. I copied your assistant and the HR compliance officer. Robert's eyes darted to his laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard, clicking, searching. I knew what he'd find if he bothered to look in the right folder. The memo had been detailed, professional, and explicit about the federal regulations governing my work. I receive hundreds of emails, he said defensively. This was marked priority, critical and flagged for response, I replied. I also requested a meeting to discuss it. That request was denied. Colonel Wright picked up his phone. I need to make some calls. Mr. Hutchinson, I strongly suggest you do not process Miss Hartwell's termination. In fact, I suggest you do the opposite. He stepped out of the room, already dialing, his voice dropping to urgent, clipped tones as the door closed behind him. Robert and I were alone. He stared at his laptop screen, then at the folder, then at me. You could have mentioned this when I started the meeting, he said. You didn't ask, I said. You scheduled a 12-hour notice meeting, didn't provide an agenda, and opened by terminating my contract. I responded by providing the relevant documentation to the appropriate authority. That's protocol. He gestured vaguely, this is a miscommunication. No, I said, and I kept my voice even, factual. This is what happens when someone makes decisions about systems they don't understand. You assumed that because I'm a contractor rather than a federal employee, my position was flexible. You didn't review the specific requirements of the work I do. You didn't consult with the program managers. You didn't check the federal regulations. You made an assumption, and it was wrong. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the door opened and Colonel Wright returned. His expression was grim. I just spoke with the program director at DCSA, he said. They're sending an emergency assessment team. ETA 4 hours. Until they arrive and complete their review, all classified operations at this facility are suspended. Mr. Hutchinson, you're going to need to brief your chain of command immediately. Robert's hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his phone. What do I tell them? Tell them that you attempted to terminate the contract of the only cleared systems integrator for 3 critical infrastructure programs without consulting federal authorities, and that we're now in crisis containment mode. The colonel's tone was absolutely flat. And tell them to have legal standing by. Robert stepped out, phone to his ear, voice already rising in stress. Colonel Wright looked at me. Miss Hartwell, I apologize for this situation. You didn't create it, sir. No, but I should have caught it sooner. I've been reviewing contract personnel lists, but I didn't cross-reference them with the critical infrastructure designations. He paused. How long have you known he was planning this? I suspected after his second week when he started asking about contractor optimization, I said. I knew for certain when my meeting request was denied, and I saw similar termination meetings scheduled for 3 other specialized contractors. The others, do they have federal designations? One does, Jackson Reeves, the cryptographic systems auditor. He holds dual program clearance. Colonel Wright closed his eyes briefly. Did Hutchinson terminate him too? Meeting scheduled for Friday. The colonel made another call. When he hung up, he gestured for me to sit. I did. Walk me through something, he said. How did someone with Hutchinson's background get authority over federally designated positions? TechCore's corporate structure separates commercial and defense divisions, but regional directors oversee both for administrative efficiency, I explained. It's supposed to be a cost-saving measure. The defense contracts have federal oversight, but the day-to-day management, HR, facilities, contract administration, that's all handled at the regional level. So corporate efficiency created a gap where someone without security clearance could make decisions about cleared personnel. Exactly. The federal program managers oversee the work itself, but the employment contracts run through corporate. Robert has authority to hire and fire within his region. The system assumes he'll consult with the program managers before making changes. He didn't. The colonel shook his head slowly. That's a structural disaster waiting to happen. It's happened before, I said. TechCore lost a facility in Colorado 2 years ago over something similar. Different regional director, same issue, terminated a critical position without understanding the federal implications. That facility lost its certification and had to be shut down. 40 people lost their jobs. And corporate didn't fix the structural problem. They issued new guidelines, more memos, more training modules, I shrugged, but they didn't change the fundamental authority structure. Regional directors still have final say on personnel. We sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, I could see people moving through the parking lot, heading to their cars for early lunch breaks, completely unaware that their jobs had just become uncertain. What happens now? I asked. DCSA sends their team, they assess the situation, they determine whether the facility can maintain its security certification, Colonel Wright said. Best case scenario. They confirm you're staying, confirm the programs are secure, and operations resume. Worst case, they pull the certification and this facility closes. And Robert? That depends on corporate and federal response. At minimum, he'll be removed from oversight of defense contracts. At maximum, the colonel grimaced, compromising critical infrastructure through negligence. That can carry federal penalties. The door opened. Robert came back in, phone still in his hand, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 15 minutes. "Corporate wants a full briefing in an hour," he said. "They're sending the General Counsel and the Defense Division VP. They asked." He swallowed. "They asked if we've contained the situation." "Have we?" Colonel Wright looked at me. Everyone waited for my response. It was a strange moment. The person who'd been fired 20 minutes ago now holding all the cards. "My contract is still active?" I asked. Robert nodded quickly. "Absolutely. The termination is rescinded, fully rescinded." "And the other contractors you were planning to cut?" He hesitated. "I need to review." "Mr. Hutchinson," Colonel Wright interrupted, "I suggest you rescind any termination plans for personnel holding federal clearances until after DCSA completes their review. In fact, I suggest you provide Ms. Hartwell with a list of every personnel change you were considering, and let her flag which positions have federal implications." Robert looked like he wanted to object, but he just nodded. "There's something else," I said. "The reason you were looking at contractor costs in the first place, you're under pressure to reduce expenses, correct?" "Regional budgets are tight," Robert admitted. "Corporate wants 10% reduction in operational costs across all divisions." "And you thought cutting high-salary contractors was the solution?" "Contractors cost more per hour than employees. It seemed logical." "It would be," I said, "if you were running a commercial operation. But defense contracts work differently. The federal government provides funding specifically allocated for specialized positions. You can't just cut those positions and pocket the savings. The funding is tied to the work being performed by qualified personnel. Cut the personnel, lose the funding." Robert sank into a chair. "So the cost reduction target is impossible." "For defense contractors, yes. The savings have to come from efficiency improvements, process optimization, overhead reduction, not personnel cuts. At least not specialized cleared personnel." I paused. "That was in the memo I sent you." He put his head in his hands. Colonel Wright's phone buzzed. He checked it and stood. "DCSA team is ahead of schedule. They'll be here in 90 minutes. Mr. Hutchinson, I need you to prepare a complete briefing on this incident. Ms. Hartwell, I need you to document your current program status and verify all security protocols are intact." "Yes, sir," I said. As the colonel left, Robert looked up at me. "Why didn't you just tell me this before, when I first started reviewing budgets?" "I tried," I said simply. "I sent the memo, I requested a meeting. You declined. Then I tried to bring it up during the general staff meeting 2 weeks ago, and you said contractor concerns could be handled through appropriate channels. I used the appropriate channels. You didn't engage with them." "I thought you were just trying to protect your job." "I was," I admitted. "But not just my job, everyone's jobs. This facility employs 230 people. If we lose federal certification, they all lose their positions. So yes, I was protecting my job, but I was also trying to prevent exactly what's happening right now." He stared at the table. "What do I do?" It wasn't really my place to advise the man who tried to fire me an hour ago. But I thought about my parents' community center, about how they'd approach someone who'd made a mistake. "Be honest in your briefing," I said. "Don't minimize what happened, don't make excuses. Explain that you didn't understand the federal contract structure and that you've learned from this. Show them you're taking steps to prevent it from happening again. And listen to the people who do understand these systems." Robert nodded slowly. "Will you stay after all this?" "That depends," I said. "Am I staying because I'm critical infrastructure that you legally can't remove? Or am I staying because TechCorps values the work I do and wants to support that work properly?" "Both," he offered weakly. "That's honest, at least." I stood and gathered my folder. "I'll prepare the documentation for DCSA. We'll see what corporate and federal decide, and then I'll make my decision." I left Robert in the conference room and headed back to my office, a small, secure workspace in the classified section of the facility. The area required badge access and biometric verification. My office itself was a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, specially constructed to prevent any electronic eavesdropping or data leakage. Inside, I had 3 computer systems, each isolated from the others, each connected to different secure networks. My work involved integrating data from multiple classified sources, ensuring that different defense systems could communicate without creating security vulnerabilities. It was complex, detailed work that required understanding not just the technology, but the federal regulations governing every aspect of it. I started documenting the current status of each program. Project Sentinel was running smoothly. The integration I'd completed last month had actually improved system efficiency by 18%. Operation Watchtower needed some updates, but nothing critical. The Aegis protocol implementation was in maintenance mode, all systems green. Everything was exactly as it should be. If DCSA arrived and found any security gaps, any protocol violations, the situation would get much worse. But I'd been meticulous. That was the job. Around 11:30, my desk phone rang. Internal line. Sophia Hartwell, I answered. Sophia, it's Amanda. Amanda Park, the facility's senior HR administrator. Can you come to conference room A? Corporate is on video call and they want to speak with you. On my way. Conference room A was the largest one, equipped for video conferencing with the main corporate office in Boston. When I arrived, the screen showed 4 people. Gregory Walsh, the general counsel. Diana Richardson, the Defense Division VP. Thomas Chen. I caught myself. No, wait, the requirement was not to use Chen in the story. Let me reconsider. When I arrived, the screen showed 4 people. Gregory Walsh, the general counsel. Diana Richardson, the Defense Division VP. Thomas Bellamy, the Chief Operating Officer. And someone I didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an Air Force pin on her lapel. Robert sat at the conference table looking miserable. Colonel Wright sat beside him, ramrod straight. Amanda gestured for me to sit. Miss Hartwell, Gregory Walsh began. Thank you for joining us. I'm Greg Walsh, Tech Corps' General Counsel. I believe you know Diana Richardson, and this is our COO, Thomas Bellamy. The 4th person on this call is Colonel Patricia. He stopped himself. Apologies. Brigadier General Kimberly Frost, DCSA Program Security Director. My posture improved automatically. A brigadier general on the call meant this had escalated even further than I'd realized. Miss Hartwell, General Frost said, her voice crisp and authoritative. I've reviewed your clearance file and your program documentation. I need you to answer some questions directly and honestly. Your security clearance protects you in these matters, so please speak freely. Yes, ma'am. Were you given any indication that your contract termination was being considered prior to this morning's meeting? No direct indication, ma'am. I had concerns based on Mr. Hutchinson's general comments about contractor costs and his questions about personnel optimization. That's why I sent the memorandum 3 weeks ago outlining the federal requirements for my position. And that memorandum was ignored. It received no response, and my meeting request to discuss it was declined. General Frost's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. When did you become aware that your position held critical infrastructure designation? I was informed when I received the designation 14 months ago, ma'am. DCSA sent the formal notification, and I was briefed on the additional reporting requirements and security protocols. And you've maintained those protocols? Yes, ma'am. Monthly status reports, quarterly security assessments, immediate notification of any potential vulnerabilities. All filed on schedule. She nodded. I've seen them, they're thorough. She turned her attention to the corporate executives. Mr. Walsh, Miss Richardson, Mr. Bellamy, we have a significant problem. This facility holds certifications for 9 separate classified programs, representing approximately $110 million in annual federal funding. 3 of those programs, representing $42 million, are currently at risk due to this incident. Diana Richardson leaned forward. General Frost, we've rescinded the termination. Miss Hartwell's contract is secure. Can't we move forward on that basis? Not immediately, General Frost said. The issue isn't just whether Miss Hartwell stays. The issue is that your corporate structure allowed this situation to occur at all. A regional director without security clearance, without understanding of federal contracts, was given authority to terminate critical infrastructure positions. That represents a fundamental security vulnerability. Thomas Bellamy spoke up. General, our regional directors manage administrative functions, not program content. The oversight is supposed to be separate. Supposed to be, General Frost repeated. But in practice, Mr. Hutchinson was able to schedule a termination meeting, prepare termination paperwork, and attempt to execute that termination without any consultation with program managers or federal liaisons. The safeguards in your system failed. The corporate executives exchanged glances. Gregory Walsh cleared his throat. What's DCSA's recommendation? We're sending a full assessment team to evaluate not just this incident, but TechCore's entire personnel management structure for cleared positions. That review will take approximately 2 weeks. During that time, any personnel changes affecting cleared positions must be approved by both DCSA and the relevant program managers. If we find systemic problems, TechCore's facility certifications will be suspended pending remediation. Diana Richardson paled. Suspended, that would shut down our defense operations entirely. Yes, General Frost said flatly, which is why I suggest you take this very seriously. There was a long pause. Finally, Thomas Bellamy spoke. General Frost will cooperate fully with your assessment. Mr. Walsh will coordinate our response. You have my personal commitment that will address any structural issues you identify. I appreciate that, Mr. Bellamy. General Frost's gaze shifted back to me. Miss Hartwell, do you have any security concerns about continuing your work during this assessment period? It was a loaded question. If I said yes, it could trigger additional scrutiny. If I said no but concerns existed, I'd be violating my security obligations. No immediate security concerns, ma'am, I said carefully. All programs are operating within normal parameters. However, I recommend that any plan system updates or modifications be delayed until the assessment is complete to avoid any potential compliance questions. Agreed. Coordinate with Colonel Wright on a holding status for non-critical updates. She turned back to the corporate executives. We'll have our assessment team on site Monday morning. I expect full access to personnel files, management structures, and policy documentation. Coordinate with my office to arrange facilities. Understood, Gregory Walsh said. The video call ended. For a moment, nobody in the conference room moved. Then Diana Richardson's voice came through the speakers again. She'd muted but stayed on the line. Sophia, can you stay on for a moment? Robert, Colonel Wright, thank you. We'll be in touch. It was a clear dismissal. Robert left quickly, relief and worry warring on his face. Colonel Wright caught my eye, gave a small nod of support, and departed. Amanda Park checked that the door was closed and the room was secure, then left as well. I was alone with the video conference screen showing 3 executives. Sophia, Diana Richardson began, her tone different now, less formal, more direct. I need to understand something. This memo you sent Robert, did you send copies to anyone else? I copied his assistant and the HR compliance officer, as I mentioned. I also filed a copy in the secure program documentation system, per protocol. But you didn't escalate to corporate. No, ma'am. The reporting structure says facility-level issues go through the regional director. I followed the structure. Thomas Bellamy leaned forward, even when the regional director was the problem. I didn't know he was the problem until he ignored the memo, I said. I thought I was providing information he needed. When he didn't respond, I assumed he'd reviewed it and decided no meeting was necessary. I didn't know he was planning terminations until the meeting was scheduled yesterday. Gregory Walsh studied me through the screen. You had 12 hours notice for that meeting. You prepared documentation, you brought your clearance papers, you knew exactly how to handle the situation. That's not panic response. That's preparation. He wasn't wrong. I'd spent most of Tuesday evening making sure I had everything I might need. I prepared for multiple possibilities, I said. Best case, the meeting was routine administrative review. Worst case, it was termination. I brought documentation that would be relevant to either scenario. And you knew exactly who to hand it to, Diana Richardson observed. Not Robert, the military liaison. Colonel Wright has federal authority over program security. Mr. Hutchinson has corporate authority over contracts. For a matter involving both, yes, ma'am, I knew who needed to see the documentation first. Thomas Bellamy smiled slightly. You outmaneuvered him. I followed protocol, I corrected. There's no regulation that says I have to make it easy for someone to violate federal security requirements, even if that someone is trying to fire me. Gregory Walsh actually laughed, a short bark of sound. Fair point, he sobered. Sophia, I'm going to be blunt. This situation is a disaster for TechCorps. We're looking at a federal investigation, possible suspension of operations, and significant reputation damage in the defense contracting community. But you handled it exactly right. You tried to prevent it, you documented your efforts, and when it happened anyway, you responded appropriately. Thank you, sir. Which brings me to the real question, Diana Richardson said. Are you going to stay? I took a breath. That depends on what happens next. Explain. Right now, I'm valuable because I'm critical infrastructure and removing me would trigger federal penalties. That's not the same as being valued for the work I do. If TechCorps fixes its structural problems, implements real oversight for cleared positions, and ensures this can't happen again, then yes, I'd consider staying. If this becomes a temporary patch job that reverts to the same problems 6 months from now, then no. I'll fulfill my contract obligations, help transition my responsibilities if that's possible, and move to an organization that takes federal security seriously. The three executives exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some unspoken communication. What if we offered you a different role? Thomas Bellamy asked. I blinked, sir. This incident exposed a gap we didn't know we had, he continued. We need someone who understands both the federal requirements and the corporate operations. Someone who can bridge that gap and make sure we don't have regional directors making decisions about things they don't understand. Diana Richardson picked up the thread. We're creating a new position, Director of Cleared Personnel Operations. It would be corporate level, reporting directly to me. Your responsibility would be oversight of all personnel decisions affecting cleared positions across all TechCorps facilities. You'd review any proposed changes, ensure federal compliance, and serve as liaison between corporate management and program security. My mind raced. It was a significant promotion, from individual contributor to director level, from single facility to corporate scope. You'd still maintain your clearances and your program access, Diana added, but you'd also have authority to intervene when situations like this arise. Think of it as institutionalizing what you did today, making sure someone with your knowledge is always in the loop. Gregory Walsh leaned forward. To be clear, Sophia, this isn't a bribe to keep quiet about what happened. The federal assessment is happening regardless. This is us recognizing that we need this function, and you've proven you understand it better than anyone else we have. What about Robert? I asked. Mr. Hutchinson will be reassigned to a purely commercial region, Diana said. No defense contracts, no cleared personnel. He'll have opportunities to rebuild his career, but not in an area where he can compromise federal programs. And the structural changes. We're implementing a policy requiring federal liaison approval for any personnel changes affecting cleared positions, Gregory Walsh said. We're adding security compliance training for all regional directors, and we're creating your position to ensure ongoing oversight. Those changes will be permanent, codified in corporate policy, and included in our federal compliance documentation. It was more than I'd expected, actually implementing structural change rather than just adding more memos. I'd want to review the full job description, I said. And I'd want to be involved in developing the new policies, not just enforcing them. Thomas Bellamy smiled. Sophia, if you take this job, you'd be writing those policies. That's half the point. Then yes, I said. Pending review of the specifics, I'm interested. Diana Richardson nodded, satisfaction clear on her face. Greg will send you the draft job description by end of day. We'll formalize everything after DCSA completes their assessment. We want them to see we're serious about fixing this. In the meantime, you continue your current work, cooperate with the assessment team, and start thinking about what policies we need." "Understood." "One more thing," Thomas Bellamy said. "Thank you. You could have let this blow up much worse. You could have gone straight to DCSA yourself, triggered the investigation without giving us any warning. You didn't. You tried to work within the system first. That matters." The call ended. I sat alone in the conference room for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. 24 hours ago, I'd been a contractor worried about potential termination. Now I was looking at a director-level position with corporate-wide authority. It felt surreal. My phone buzzed, text from Jackson Reeves. "Heard there was excitement this morning. You okay?" I smiled and typed back, "Meeting on Friday is canceled. You're safe. Long story." His response came quickly, "Beer and long stories, tonight." "Definitely." I gathered my things and headed back to my office. As I walked through the facility, I noticed people watching me. Word had clearly spread that something significant had happened, even if they didn't know the details. Amanda Park caught up with me in the hallway. "Sophia, quick question. What should I tell people who are asking about this morning?" "The truth," I said. "There was a misunderstanding about contract requirements that's been resolved. Operations continue as normal. DCSA is conducting a routine assessment to ensure compliance." "That's it." "That's it. Anything more specific involves classified program details or personnel matters, neither of which should be discussed casually." She nodded. "Fair enough, and you're okay." "I'm fine," I assured her. "Actually better than fine, but I can't talk about it yet." "Understood. Let me know if you need anything." As she left, I reflected on how different this could have gone. If Robert had succeeded in terminating my contract, if I hadn't had the documentation ready, if Colonel Wright hadn't been in that meeting, the cascade of failures could have been catastrophic. Back in my office, I pulled up the secure documentation system and began drafting a detailed incident report. Even though the outcome had been positive, the security protocols required documentation of any threat to program integrity. This qualified. As I wrote, I thought about what the new role would mean. Director of Cleared Personnel Operations. I'd be responsible for preventing incidents like this across every TechCore facility. I'd need to understand not just my own programs, but every classified contract the company held. I'd need to work with regional directors, program managers, federal liaisons, and corporate executives. It was daunting. It was also exactly the kind of challenge I wanted. My parents had taught me that empathy meant understanding people's perspectives, but it didn't mean accepting harm. You could recognize why someone made a mistake while still holding them accountable. You could be kind while enforcing boundaries. Robert had made a mistake born of ignorance and pressure to cut costs. That didn't excuse the mistake, but it explained it. The appropriate response wasn't to destroy his career. He was being reassigned, given a chance to succeed in an area where he had relevant expertise. But it also wasn't to pretend the mistake didn't matter. Hence the federal assessment and the structural changes. That balance felt right. Around 3 p.m., Colonel Wright stopped by my office. "Got a minute?" "Of course, sir." He sat in the visitor's chair, not easy in his uniform in the small space. "I wanted to apologize properly. This morning that shouldn't have happened." "You didn't know," I said. "I should have. Part of my job is maintaining oversight of program security, and that includes knowing who holds critical clearances. I've been too focused on technical security and not enough on personnel security." "Will that be part of the DCSA assessment?" "Probably," he admitted. "But honestly, it should be. We got complacent. The programs run smoothly, the technology works, and we stopped paying attention to the human elements. You almost paid the price for that." "But I didn't," I pointed out. "The system worked. It was messy, it was stressful, but the safeguards caught the problem before real damage occurred." "Barely." "Barely is still success in security work," I said. "Every incident that doesn't become a disaster is a lesson in what works and what needs improvement. This incident taught us that TechCore needs better integration between corporate management and federal oversight. Now that lesson gets implemented as policy. Colonel Wright studied me. Corporate offered you something, didn't they? I saw Richardson's face during that last call. I can't discuss it until after the assessment, I said carefully. But let's say that TechCore is taking the structural problems seriously. He nodded slowly. Good, you deserve recognition for how you handled this. He stood. The DCSA team arrives Monday at 0800. They'll want to interview you as part of their assessment. Be honest with them like you were today. Always, sir. After he left, I returned to my documentation. The incident report needed to be precise: facts, timeline, actions taken, outcomes achieved. No editorializing, no blame assignment beyond what the facts showed. By 5 p.m., I'd completed the report and filed it through the secure system. My regular work for the day was done. I could leave. But I pulled up a blank document instead and started drafting something else. Preliminary recommendations for cleared personnel oversight policy. If I was going to take this director role, I wanted to come in with ideas. The federal assessment would identify problems, but I could start identifying solutions. Key elements: mandatory consultation with federal liaisons before any personnel action affecting cleared positions. Regular audits of clearance status and program requirements. Training for all managers with cleared personnel reporting to them. Clear escalation paths when corporate needs conflicted with federal requirements. I worked until 6:30, barely noticing the time. When I finally looked up, the office was quiet. Most people had gone home. I saved my draft, locked my computers, and headed out. Jackson Reeves met me in the parking lot, leaning against his truck. So, he said as I approached, canceled Friday meeting, DCSA assessment team, building buzzing with rumors, want to explain. Over that beer you mentioned, I said, somewhere far from the office. We ended up at a quiet bar in Arlington, the kind of place where defense contractors gathered after work, but nobody talked shop because everyone knew everyone else was cleared and operational security mattered. Over drinks, I explained what had happened. Jackson listened, his expression shifting from concern to disbelief to something like awe. He actually tried to fire you without checking your clearances, he said when I finished. He knew I had clearances, he just didn't understand what they meant or why they mattered. I took a sip of my beer, and to be fair, the system made it easy for him to not understand. There was no checkpoint that required him to consult with anyone before scheduling that termination meeting. There is now, I'm guessing. There will be. DCSA is going to make sure of it. Jackson shook his head. You know what's wild? You saved that facility, 230 jobs. Hutchinson was going to cut you and probably me and who knows who else. If you'd let it happen, if you just walked away, the whole place would have lost certification. I thought about it, I admitted. For about 30 seconds this morning, I thought about just letting him process the termination and then watching it all fall apart. Let him learn the hard way. Why didn't you? Because it wouldn't just hurt him, it would hurt everyone. The federal employees working on those programs, the contractors like us, the administrative staff who have nothing to do with classified work but would lose their jobs anyway. Revenge isn't worth that cost. So instead you schooled him in federal regulations and apparently impressed corporate enough to offer you a promotion. I smiled. I can neither confirm nor deny discussions about future positions until after the federal assessment concludes. That's a yes. Jackson raised his glass. Congratulations, whatever it is. We clinked glasses. Can I ask you something? Jackson said after a moment. Why did you prepare those documents? You said you got 12 hours notice. Most people would have just shown up to the meeting. Habit, I guess. My dad used to say that hope is not a plan. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and you'll handle whatever actually happens. When I saw that meeting notice with no agenda, my instincts said something was wrong. So I prepared. Your instincts were right. This time, I acknowledged. I've had plenty of times when I overprepared for nothing, but overpreparation wastes a few hours. Underpreparation can cost everything. We talked for another hour. About work, about the industry, about the particular insanity of defense contracting where you could be simultaneously essential and expendable depending on who understood your value. Finally, Jackson checked his watch. I should head out. Early morning tomorrow, and if DCSA is coming Monday, I want to make sure all my documentation is pristine. Good idea, I said. I'll do the same this weekend. We paid our tab and headed to the parking lot. Before we parted ways, Jackson turned back. Hey, Sophia, when you're running this new cleared personnel oversight thing, remember those of us still in the trenches? Yeah. Don't let corporate turn you into another clueless manager. I laughed, I promise. That's the whole point, making sure management isn't clueless. Good enough, see you Monday. I drove home through Arlington traffic, my mind still processing the day. My apartment was in a quiet complex near Courthouse, a one-bedroom that was overpriced but convenient. I'd moved here when I started at TechCore, wanting to be close enough that the commute wouldn't drain me. Inside, I dropped my bag, changed into comfortable clothes, and made myself dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables. While I ate, I pulled out my personal laptop and started researching. If I was going to be director of cleared personnel operations, I needed to understand how other defense contractors handled this issue. I searched for articles about security clearance management, personnel oversight in classified programs, and incidents similar to what had almost happened today. There were more incidents than I expected. Contractors losing certifications, facilities shutting down, programs being terminated, often because of personnel management failures. Someone retired without a replacement trained. Someone was fired without understanding their role's criticality. Someone's clearance lapsed because renewal paperwork wasn't filed on time. The human element was consistently the weakest link in security. But there were also success stories. Companies that had implemented robust oversight systems, created career development paths for cleared personnel, and built institutional knowledge that didn't disappear when individuals left. Those were the models I needed to study. I made notes until nearly midnight, then forced myself to stop. Tomorrow was Friday. I'd work my normal day, prepare for the DCSA assessment, and try to maintain some semblance of routine while everything was changing. Friday morning arrived with an unexpected email from Robert Hutchinson. Sophia, I owe you an apology. What I attempted yesterday was wrong, and it came from ignorance I should have addressed weeks ago. I'm sorry for the stress I caused you and the risk I created for the facility. I'm glad you're staying, and I hope the new role works out. You'll be excellent at it. Robert. I read it twice. It was brief but seemed genuine. An apology that didn't make excuses or minimize what had happened. I wrote back, Robert, thank you for the apology. I appreciate it. I hope your reassignment goes well, and I think you'll thrive in commercial operations. Best of luck. Sophia. It felt like closure. The day passed quietly. Colonel Wright briefed the staff about the upcoming DCSA assessment, framing it as a routine security review, technically true, even if the reasons behind it weren't routine. People seemed reassured. Jackson's termination meeting was officially canceled. He sent me a relieved thumbs-up emoji. At 4 p.m., Gregory Walsh sent the Director of Cleared Personnel Operations job description as promised. I read through it carefully. The role was everything Diana Richardson had described. Corporate-level position, reporting to the Defense Division VP, responsible for oversight of all cleared personnel across all facilities, authority to review and approve/deny personnel actions, liaison between corporate and federal program management. The salary was nearly double what I currently made. The benefits included relocation assistance if needed, though I'd be based in the Arlington area. The expectations were high travel to all facilities quarterly, immediate response to any personnel security issues, development and implementation of comprehensive oversight policies. It was a big job, maybe too big. But then I thought about this week, about Robert nearly making a catastrophic mistake because no one was there to stop him, about the Colorado facility that had shut down 2 years ago, about all the incidents I'd researched last night. Someone needed to do this job, and I was qualified. I sent my formal acceptance to Gregory Walsh, acknowledging that it was contingent on successful completion of the DCSA assessment. His response came within minutes. Understood and agreed. Welcome aboard, Director Hartwell. We'll make it official after DCSA clears us. Well done this week. Director Hartwell, that would take some getting used to. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I reviewed every program I was involved with, verified all documentation, triple-checked every security protocol. By Sunday evening, I was confident that my portion of the DCSA assessment would go smoothly. Monday morning, I arrived at the facility at 7:30. The DCSA assessment team was already there, 5 people, including General Frost herself, setting up in a conference room that had been cleared for their use. Colonel Wright coordinated the logistics, while Diana Richardson and Gregory Walsh represented corporate. Robert Hutchinson was conspicuously absent. He'd been placed on administrative leave during the assessment, standard procedure when someone was part of the incident being investigated. My interview was scheduled for 10 a.m. When I entered the conference room, General Frost sat at the head of the table with 2 other assessors, a technical security specialist and a personnel security analyst. Miss Hartwell, General Frost began, thank you for your cooperation. This interview is part of our formal assessment of the incident that occurred Wednesday and TechCore's personnel security procedures generally. Your answers will be documented and may be included in our report. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Good, let's begin. They walked through the entire incident, timeline, documentation, communications, my decision-making process. They asked about the facility's security culture, management oversight, and whether I'd observed other concerning practices. I answered everything honestly. Yes, there were some communication gaps between corporate and program management. No, I hadn't observed other security violations. Yes, I believe the incident resulted from structural problems rather than intentional misconduct. No, I didn't have concerns about continuing to work at the facility if the structural problems were addressed. After 90 minutes, General Frost closed her notebook. Last question, Miss Hartwell. You've been offered a new position, Director of Cleared Personnel Operations. Do you believe you can be effective in that role while maintaining your current program responsibilities? Short term, yes, ma'am. Long term, I'd need to transition some program responsibilities to other cleared personnel as the director role expanded. But I believe the director position is critical enough that it justifies that transition. Why? Because this incident was preventable, I said. With proper oversight, Mr. Hutchinson would have known he couldn't terminate my contract before he scheduled that meeting. With proper systems, he wouldn't have had the authority to schedule it without consultation. With proper training, he would have understood the federal implications of his budget pressures. Every piece of this was preventable, but prevention requires someone with the authority and knowledge to implement it. That's what the director role would do. General Frost studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, Miss Hartwell. That's all we need. I was dismissed. As I left, I caught a glimpse of their notes, phrases like comprehensive understanding, appropriate response, and recommend continuation visible on the page. It seemed like a good sign. The assessment team spent the rest of the week at the facility, interviewing staff, reviewing policies, examining documentation. By Friday afternoon, they'd completed their work. Gregory Walsh called an all-hands meeting for 4 p.m. The entire facility gathered in the main conference area, cleared and non-cleared personnel alike, everyone anxious to hear the outcome. General Frost stood at the front, her uniform crisp, her expression neutral. I'll keep this brief, she began. DCSA has completed our assessment of this facility and TechCore's personnel security procedures. We identified several areas of concern, primarily related to the structural separation between corporate management and federal program oversight. However, we also found that TechCore has begun implementing corrective measures and has demonstrated commitment to addressing these issues systematically. She paused, and the room held its breath. Therefore, DCSA is maintaining this facility's security certification. All classified programs will continue normal operations. However, we will conduct a follow-up assessment in 6 months to verify that the corrective measures have been fully implemented and are effective. Relief rippled through the room. Jobs were safe. Programs would continue. Additionally, General Frost continued, DCSA is recommending that TechCorps' new personnel oversight structure be adopted as a best practice model for other defense contractors. Ms. Sophia Hartwell, the Director of Cleared Personnel Operations, will be invited to present this model at the next Defense Security Services Symposium. Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt my face flush. General Frost found me in the crowd. Ms. Hartwell, your professionalism and adherence to security protocols during this incident prevented what could have been a catastrophic failure. The defense community is better served with people like you in positions of authority. Congratulations on your appointment. The room erupted in applause. Colleagues I'd worked with for months, people who'd barely known my name, all celebrating this outcome. When the meeting ended, I was surrounded by well-wishers. Jackson pushed through the crowd and hugged me. Director Hartwell, look at you. Amanda Park shook my hand enthusiastically. I knew something good was happening. This is wonderful. Even Colonel Wright approached, offering a crisp salute that I wasn't entitled to but appreciated nonetheless. Well deserved, he said simply. Diana Richardson pulled me aside as the crowd dispersed. Sophia, let's meet Monday morning to discuss your transition plan. We want you in the director role officially starting the 1st of next month. That gives you 3 weeks to wrap up your program work and prepare. Thank you, I managed. I'll be ready. That evening, I called my parents in Ohio. My mother answered on the second ring. Honey, we haven't heard from you all week. How are things? Things are good, Mom, really good. I got a promotion. I explained what had happened, the attempted termination, the federal intervention, the new role. My mother listened, asking occasional questions, and I could hear my father on the extension. When I finished, there was a pause. Sophia, my father said, his voice warm with pride, you did exactly what we always taught you. You stood up for what was right, but you did it in a way that protected everyone, not just yourself. That's leadership. Your new title sounds impressive, my mother added, but what matters is that you're using it to help people, to make sure others don't face what you faced. That's the work that matters. We talked for another hour, about family, about the community center, about everything and nothing. When I finally hung up, I felt grounded again. The next 3 weeks were intense. I documented everything about my current programs, trained my replacement, a talented analyst named Morgan Phillips who'd been waiting for an opportunity like this, and began developing the comprehensive oversight policies for my new role. I visited TechCorps' other facilities, meeting with regional directors and program managers, understanding their specific challenges and needs. I worked with Gregory Walsh's legal team to draft policy language that satisfied both corporate and federal requirements. And I prepared my presentation for the Defense Security Services Symposium, distilling everything I'd learned into a model that other contractors could implement. On the 1st of the month, I officially became Director of Cleared Personnel Operations. My new office was at TechCorps' corporate headquarters in Boston, but I'd spend most of my time traveling between facilities. My first official act was to implement a mandatory consultation process. Any personnel action affecting cleared positions now required review by the relevant federal liaison before being executed. It was a simple change, but it would prevent exactly what Robert had attempted. My second act was to create a quarterly training program for all managers with cleared personnel reporting to them. Understanding federal requirements wasn't optional anymore. It was part of the job. 6 months later, DCSA conducted their follow-up assessment. General Frost herself led the team again. The result, full certification with commendation. TechCorps' personnel oversight system was now the standard other contractors were being encouraged to adopt. At the Defense Security Services Symposium, I presented to an audience of 300 security professionals. I told them about the incident, about the near disaster, and about the systematic changes that prevented it from happening again. During the Q&A, someone asked, "What would you say to other contractors who think this kind of oversight is too burdensome?" I thought about Robert, about the 230 people whose jobs had been at risk, about every incident I'd researched where things had gone wrong. I'd say that security isn't burdensome when you understand what you're protecting, I answered. We're not just protecting classified information. We're protecting the people who work with that information, the programs that depend on their expertise, and the national security mission that relies on those programs. That's not a burden, that's a responsibility. And if we're not willing to take that responsibility seriously, we shouldn't be in this business. The audience applauded. After the presentation, General Frost approached me. "Well done, Director Hartwell. You've turned an incident into an industry improvement. That's rare." "Thank you, ma'am. I had good teachers in crisis management." She smiled slightly. "Keep up the good work. The defense community needs more people who understand that security and humanity aren't opposites, they're complementary." Looking back now, I sometimes think about that Wednesday morning in March. About sitting in that conference room, hearing your contract is terminated, and making the split-second decision about how to respond. I could have responded with anger, with accusations, with immediate escalation. Instead, I responded with documentation, with protocol, with professionalism. That choice led to everything that followed, not just my promotion, but genuine systemic change that protected thousands of cleared personnel across multiple facilities. It wasn't about revenge. It was never about revenge. It was about accountability, about ensuring that mistakes became lessons rather than disasters, about building systems that protected everyone. That's what real payback looks like in the professional world. Not destruction, but construction. Not tearing down the person who wronged you, but building something better so the wrong can't happen again. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, that work gets recognized and rewarded. But even if it doesn't, it's still worth doing. Because that's what integrity means. If workplace accountability stories matter to you, subscribing helps share these experiences with others who need to hear them. Together, we're building a community that values both professionalism and humanity, and we're working toward that 7,000 subscriber milestone. Thank you for being part of this journey.